Hey, everybody, this is Micah Lieberman once again doing a Voices of Scope interview. And these are the fun part of the day where I'm talking to somebody interesting, doing interesting work in clinical research, and we get to ask them a question and we get to chat. So, Jeremy Gilbert is the CEO of AdhereTech. Hey, Jeremy, how are you?
Might be good to see you again.
So, we just saw each other at Scope. It was a busy week. We didn't spend much time together. I don't think I spent time with a million people that I wish I would have. So, did you get to see a lot of people at Scope? A lot of your old friends, new friends? How did it go for you?
Yeah, it had been after a 10-year plus hiatus, and it was amazing recognizing some, faces and seeing people and just texting. It's fascinating. People always talk about the social side of Scope and
Hmm.
almost like it's a reunion, and I
Hmm.
definitely felt that coming back.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so let's talk about clinical research. So we were talking about a few things. We were talking about engagement. We were talking patient engagement. We were talking about actual burden on patients. You have a history with your previous jobs. This is your world. We also talk about patient retention. And then we got into the nitty-gritty of kind of what you guys do, which is adherence. And when I hear the word adherence, the first thing I think of the healthcare side because it's a multi-billion dollar problem. I think of, hospitals, patients going off drug, and then ending up back in the ER. We're talking about something specifically as adherence as it relates to clinical trials and clinical research. Again, a problem, but I would say adherence isn't, you and I said it's an often overlooked part of trials, right? Because the first thing I thought of when I hear medical adherence, I think healthcare industry, not pharma research, right? So
Yeah.
tell me why is that? Why is it overlooked?
Well, we all know that adherence is important, right? If drugs only work in the people who take them, and obviously, one of a key pillar of our mission is to change that in the healthcare system at large. But in clinical trials, there's a lot at stake. Every patient you bring in, you're hoping that their data, their experiences on the drug are going to add to a story about, is this drug effective? These are the most regulated and, robust scientific experiments known to mankind. Yet, if a patient isn't taking their medication, that affects the quality of the data. That affects the quality of the conclusions that the study can have. And it also affects whether or not that patient's contribution means as much as it can be in the trial. Adherence today is overlooked. It's unfortunate, but it is. It's where pill counts come. ECOA lab, ECOA recordings will take the diaries from the patient. But in terms of actually looking at ways to change adherence in the trial and help each patient's data count more in that trial, I think that there's still a way to go, and we're here to change that.
Yeah, and also there's every trial is different. So again, well, I have to show up at a site for this many times. That's different than the example we talked about where if a patient is taking a drug multiple times per day, you know, the likelihood of that patient going off drug, going out of compliance, it gets higher and higher and higher. And one of the themes at Scope, it's been almost 20 years now. There's all this new technology. There's new ways we understand more and more, but it still comes down to enrolling patients and keeping them in the trial. So at the end, you have good data, right? So this may be an overlooked thing. So let's say you have as the example, a lot of doses per day, 4 doses per day. That's kind of a pain for a patient, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what are things we can do to make sure that this patient stays on drug, on schedule, and the data at the end is clean?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. AdhereTech we bring a solution that's essentially a pill bottle. It's actually a cover that goes over the medication container that's already being used in the trial because you often don't want to touch that. And essentially, what it does is it nudges the patient. It's if you think of adherence, it's almost like a habit. You go to the
Yeah.
gym a couple times a week, but then there's that one week that parents are in town or whatever, and you didn't go that week. And then it's just that little bit harder to get going again. So by being with the patient at that moment that they either do or don't take their medication, we have the ability to nudge them. We can give them an alert. We can give them a text message. We can let the study site coordinator know. So we can bring in the support right at that moment where the patient's having an issue, as opposed to waiting, say, for the next site visit or the next time that their pill bottle is counted. And that difference is huge in terms of supporting that patient. But those alerts are what our patients often tell us is the most important thing to them. It's stressful being on a center of life medication, and you're in a trial. You have all these requirements on you. If you're being asked to take a medication at a specific time, or in the case of 4 times a day, that's a lot for someone to take on. And we basically take the guesswork out of that for the patient. We let them know if they've taken their medication, and we let them know when it's time to, and we act a little bit like a catcher to help in the cases where they need that help.
Yeah,
But what I think what's also important is staying out of their way when they don't need it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing we do very well. We don't send you a message or a reminder that for something you've already done.
Right, because sometimes when you start receiving those automated messages from your bank or whatever it is, you just start ignore. They lose value, right? You ignore. Okay, so it seems obvious. We're talking about something that is not really quote unquote difficult, but obviously important. So here's a question: are the folks who are focused? There's the enrollment plan at Scope. We have people that have a broad set of disciplines, but also there's the folks who really are thinking about the patient journey, like the enrollment planning, actually engaging them, keeping them engaged, getting them involved in the protocol, actually enrolling the right group of patients at the right time, and then keeping them, retaining them, and everything else. Are you finding that those people that have the word retention in their job title or in their purview, their remit, do they use, are they looking at adherence as well?
I'm not sure how deeply that connection has been drawn yet in everyone's mind. I think, if you talk to a biostatistician and you say, I could give you a few more points of protocol compliance, they do the math right away and say, oh, that's less subjects I need, or more insurance policy for a effect size that might be hard to get. You say the same thing to a clinical scientist who's been thinking, oh gosh, I remember that trial from 10 years ago where when they did my PK, the people in the active arm didn't even have any medication in their system, right? Like those people in coming from that side will understand it, but this is as much as it is a almost like an insurance for the trial, as it's from an outcome point of view, it is also a burden reduction. And think of, if you're helping a patient and we could talk to them at that moment that they've decided, hey, the trial might be too much for me, or it's really hard to stay on the medication at that time. That's the perfect time to help that patient.
Yes.
And I see that as having an enormous impact on burden in a trial. And that's what we hear from our patients in a post-market space all the time about, the value of intervention right when it matters.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. Intervention when it matters, when the patient actually wants to hear from you, can use your support, can you magically be there? And I guess we just did make the connection between adherence and retention, right? We just did so in this conversation. So I see it. And I think the people at Scope do. I think we use words, and we have to also talk about what those words actually mean and how they fit into a workflow, how they fit into the process of a trial or a patient's experience on that journey. And then it's easier to connect those dots and kind of hopefully initiate those conversations. All right, cool. Well, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, Jeremy. It was good to see you. I'm glad you were at Scope too.
Yeah, good to see you, Micah. Looking forward to next year, and all the best with an incredible conference.
Cool, man. Thank you.